All right, welcome to this episode of our show, True Data Ops. I'm your host, Kent Graziano, the Data Warrior. In each episode, we bring you a podcast covering all things related to data ops with the people that are making data ops what it is today. If you've not yet done so, be sure to look up and subscribe to the DataOps.live YouTube channel, where you'll find all the recordings for our past episodes for the last 2 seasons. If you missed any of the prior episodes, summer vacation's coming up and you have a great chance to catch up on all the great conversations that I've had over the last 2 years with all the leaders in the data ops community. Better yet, you can go to the truedataops.org website and subscribe to this podcast. You'll see a QR code on your screen that you can scan that'll take you right there. Now today, my guest is Frank Bell, Snowflake Data Superhero and Snowflake Evangelist at I don't even know how to say this right, Frank. You'll have to get this. Exponential Data. Welcome back to the show, Frank.
Hey, thanks, Kent.
So how do you say that company name?
Yeah, and I use just part-time with them. I'm actually running the IT strategist brand again, and we're mostly focused on the Snowflake data apps, native applications, and the
All right.
company name was Exponential Data. Those guys are doing
That's how you're supposed to say
great.
it. Yeah, it was exponent with an L on the end. So
Yeah.
Exponential.
It's a weird name, but Tom Johnstone, Matt Arlano, that's what they came up with, and good guys that I had when we sold the original company, when we were big Snowflake partner. We eventually ended up at Accenture, and those guys helped run the data operations there.
Yeah. Well, give us while you're at it, keep going a little bit more about your background with Snowflake and and how you became a partner here with DataOps too.
Sure. I can't remember if I went over it. I'm kind of like you, a grizzled veteran. I started in data. Actually, super fortunate. I had an Air Force ROTC scholarship. So my first job out of college was as a second lieutenant in the Air Force in the 90s. And, about a couple of years into it, I was probably a first lieutenant when I really started with data. And it was the Air Force, right? So I think Oracle 4 came out in the 80s. So I think we used like Oracle 4, 5, 6, early 90s. And that's where I first, I guess besides if you think of a spreadsheet as data set, really started working with data. And in the military back in those days, it's totally opposite. It's very advanced because you got access to technology that you couldn't get access to here. And that kind of set me off. And I've always been interested in data, especially as you're able to make dynamic web on the internet with data. And I did a bunch of other things. I worked at Universal Studios, built some of the first like data-driven apps there, and I ran my own consulting company, and that's where I came across Snowflake. And just some fun stories, I guess, from the company. We built like all the back-end systems that ran things like Anschutz Entertainment Group, like Coachella,
Wow.
Stagecoach, and all those things. And I just recently ran into someone, and I thought our stuff had been retired because I think we built it early 2000s, but I just heard like they couldn't replace the touring apps. The touring app's still going.
Still running. Hey.
But in that consulting company, we built a lot of the backbone of the internet, especially in live entertainment, a lot of all data-driven tools at the time. And then we stumbled across Snowflake like end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And we immediately saw it was just such a, you came similarly, but I think you joined with Todd Bouchain, right?
Yeah, shortly after Todd. Yeah, Todd's the one that recruited me.
Exactly. So, we immediately saw it's different, became the top partner back in those days when, the big SIs didn't get it. They're still selling Redshift and BigQuery and stuff that wasn't nearly as good at the time. And yeah, that's how we ended up being like a Snowflake data superhero from the beginning, because we evangelized it really early on. We just knew it was such a different capability. And that's kind of the same thing we started with DataOps.live now and DataOps. At first it took me a while to kind of come around when you guys first published the true DataOps stuff. And because right now it's just very difficult in the market. Like it's just so complicated, and there's so many different messages, from data warehousing, data lakes, uh, all these other things like Iceberg, all the AI ML now. So, I had to first really think through data ops and how it fit into what I was thinking of and kind of the future of data.
Yeah. So when you look about that and you think through your career and all that, what's your perspective on just the concept of data ops and what it's really about, what the value it is to organizations if they're going to try to adopt a true data ops approach?
Yeah, I think too. I mean, you guys, I guess it's a combination, the DataOps.live, it's .org, right? The
Well, yeah,
website.
TrueDataOps.org. That's the site for the philosophy and the 7 pillars. Yeah.
Yeah,
It,
that's the one. I think you guys have actually done a really good job with that. Um, and most of that is pretty similar, I'd say, to what I believe. I think the challenge is, and I don't know all the listeners that are on this, is it's just it encompasses just quite a lot. So I think for a lot of people, it's such a major shift to think this way that it's taking a while, I think, for it to really um for people to embrace it holistically, like, because there's so much to those true data ops principles, with CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development is the one that I think of the most. But all the governance, the testing, monitoring, it's really the way I look at it now, especially since Gen AI has taken on. It's it's a net. I mean, it's necessary, and I think that if companies don't embrace it, or some similar levels of automation with it, with data, AI, and automation, all that kind of intersecting, they're going to get crushed, because there's so much innovation happening that without having tools like DataOps.live, without having CI/CD, without having automated testing, real like automated data quality, you're going to run into massive trouble, because there's just so much innovation now. There's so many artifacts being created, um, that you need to have this like level of continuous metadata analysis and automation that's watching everything that's being done.
Yeah, so I think we're seeing it's a similar evolution and adoption curve to when we saw Agile and DevOps start to move into the data industry. I mean, data ops is really the evolution of DevOps, but with the specifics necessary for managing data rather than just pure software code. It's one thing to do check in and check out on a bunch of software code. It's another, as you know, in Snowflake to like, well, how do I version a schema? Right? How do I version a schema? How do I version a table? How do I version an entire database and not lose track of that? And that was one of the things that I think got me, because I think early on, when I was first early at Snowflake, I wrote a blog post about doing agile DevOps using zero copy clone. Well, that turned out to be really the beginning of data ops, of really looking at it from a data perspective. And Snowflake built the functionality to let us actually do that effectively without having to, have you know, hundreds of terabytes of extra disk space so that we could make a copy of a database, or waiting weeks like we used to do, weeks, sometimes months, to get a copy of the production data so that you could do some testing and not worry about blowing up your production environment. Yeah, I think You talked about all the innovations that are happening, and I just think all of this now, when we talk about things at scale, it's now not just the data and the amount of data we have and the number of sources of data we have. It's the rate at which new things are coming into play, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you I mean, this is tangentially related, but I don't know how much you're using the Gen AI tools or Gemini, Chat GPT. Snowflake has Arctic, and I'm
Cortex
talking
now.
about a combination of the Chat GPTs. I mean, the chat bots that are tied to the LLMs and the LLMs themselves. But the pace of innovation is like nothing we've ever seen before. It's not even close. Like when I talked about the Air Force days, we were innovative. Like one of the first projects I was on, I think we were doing 3-month delivery cycles, and that was in the early '90s. That was like we were almost like crazy because most of them were yearly, maybe 6 months, and then obviously the 2000s, the beginning of concepts of CI/CD, at least at the code level. We went, and I was fortunate enough during the consulting company to do early, like versions of this. And the company that we did that with, it was a game changer to be able to do an automated build every week or even every day, and some level of test driven development. You know, it was amazing. But we've moved all the way to this place where almost everything, there's with Kafka type things or streaming. There's all this automated data sets, and without having our streaming data sets, without having some type of checks and balances in place with AI. I mean, if you give AI bad sets of data, you're you're I mean, you could potentially, it could be catastrophic depending on what you're using it for.
What you're using the AI for. Yeah, I think we're back to our old mantra of garbage in, garbage out. It's just now it's even maybe more critical to think about that, like you said, about the quality of the data, having automated monitoring and testing, because we're doing it at such a rapid pace that you could have things go sideways faster than you ever imagined, and like you said, with potentially catastrophic consequences if this data is being used to feed an AI or a big machine learning algorithm, or trying to retrain an LLM, and you get some bad data, it just swoops in there and completely skews the results that are coming out.
Yeah. And what I meant to point out too is the innovation is so great, like so fast now. Like I knew, so with my team, we've been using, Gemini, Bard, Gemini, Chat GPT, 4.5, and now 4.0. And I gotta tell you, what this is, like I said, it's partially related. The innovation, the speed, like I'd say with Chat GPT 4.5, when we were coding, we could give it most a lot of JavaScript, Python functions. We could probably give it, I don't know, 150, 200 lines of code and get decent responses with 4.5 and correcting. What's really great at is if you're missing a semicolon, the syntax is off, like those type of things that we had to deal with. You could either take minutes, seconds, or hours because it's just so hidden in the code. It can fix it right away. So that's a major game changer. But also the level of innovation, like I said, like you could give it even SQL like 100, 150, maybe 200 lines of code, and I'd say it's 60 to 90% correct. Um, but now with this new model that came out, I don't know, we've been testing it for almost 2 weeks. I think it's about Chat GPT 4.0. We're seeing 90% or higher correct, like just fully correct code, fully commented. It has memory now, and I think it can handle maybe more, but it's around 500 lines of code that you can get from it easily. So that that's like beyond a 2x improvement. I knew that was coming, but the level of productivity of what you can do now with these tools and the accuracy, and I'm just talking on the code side.
Yeah.
It's like it's coming, but I think they let that model out right before Google's conference to kind of preempt them. But like all these big guys are massive, almost $1 trillion organizations. They're one upping each other like every few weeks or months, and that this pace of innovation is like nothing we've ever seen before. So that's what I think on the data side makes it, you must have data ops at this point, because you can't innovate and iterate at a pace required now unless some of the big guys have homegrown tools, but anybody mid-market or even most larger Fortune 5,000 companies, they need something like DataOps.live that, like they had Guy and Justin, they've been focused on this problem for a long time, where the tool is
Yeah.
much more, the automation it can achieve is insane. Like we're building native apps on top of it now, and we're probably the longest developer of Snowflake native apps. Like we worked with it in the first version, so we've been working with Unmesh and them for over 2 years. And the first version, it obviously got scrapped, and they moved to the next version because they made it more robust. But like us developing that manually with the manifest file, all that stuff, it's good. It's still amazing, but DataOps.live takes it to a whole nother level of automation and maintainability.
Well, and I think that's where now we start talking about. I think you're talking about native apps, so I'm going to talk about data products now, right?
Yeah.
Because we've got this concept of data products out there in the industry. That's again probably right next to Gen AI is one of the hottest buzzwords, certainly in the data industry now. So how does that factor into your approach, and even like you said, using Gen AI in that context, along with a real data ops approach and a data ops wrapper to build and deliver data products?
Yeah. The thing with I'm a firm believer, I'd say, in the whole data products conceptual approach, and I think it's useful in helping a lot of people move from kind of, we built data applications are really data products previously, even in our most organized times, sort of in a hodgepodge way, because really, on what you mentioned before, no matter what anybody says, you could say and I think we talked about this before, data warehouse, agile data warehouse. Let's say until you had zero copy clone, none of that was ever possible in reality. And so I think that was kind of where you could begin to think about data products. Now with Snowflake native apps as one of the mechanisms that you can create a data product. I mean, obviously, there's tons of Snowflake powered by, let's call it, apps that were still data products, but not as integrated within their specific framework. And now with Snowpark and the AI ML and Cortex, all that stuff is much easier to do. But I think data products combined with data ops, it enables like a way to encapsulate this stuff to where, again, it's like can be real, like where it can actually be done. Because
Right.
without these tool sets kind of around it, data products again was just more of like a concept. um, Now it's making it more a reality. But all that being said, and I don't know what you see, but I still think it's really early in the data products. Like when I look at even more, call them data mature organizations, they're still at the beginning of kind of their data product strategy, their data products implementation. So there's still like a lot of education, and not just education like I don't want to say paradigm shift, but for people to basically embrace, we're still getting people off of SFTP and
Yeah.
APIs. Like people are still like every year we'll go to a summit and they'll be like, wow, I can do data sharing and I'm inventing data movement. I'm like, yeah, we've been talking about that since 2018 or 2019.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah, it's been 6 years. Yeah, I mean, the first initial data sharing, and then we had the data share house, and then we had the Snowflake data marketplace. Now we just got the Snowflake marketplace, right?
yeah,
And you're able to share not just data and data sets, but data apps, right? And uh, shared functions, all sorts of things that we can do now that we can basically productize them and put them on um, a marketplace to make it shareable and in some cases monetizable. And I think that one of the biggest challenges is, like you said, the data product concept. People kind of got it, but like you said, it's a shift in mindset because it's a product mindset, which software companies have had that, right? Any software company, Microsoft, everybody you could think of, whether it's Oracle, Microsoft, SAP, they've been thinking in terms of products and product delivery for literally decades. And now we're trying to bring that over into the data. What does that mean to put together a product that delivers data somehow, whether it's a set of analytics, whether it's a set of forecasts, whatever that is, but it is a different mindset, and it's not a we go do an ER diagram and build a big schema and write some ETL code anymore. I mean, that's like step one, right? But how are we going to deliver it? How are we going to package it? How are we going to manage it? How are we going to maintain it? How is there a user feedback loop somehow that we're going to do improvements? How do we version it? How do we version a data product? And I think, like you said, without something like data ops and something that can automate all of that as the speed of innovation picks up, you can't hire enough people, enough engineers to manage all that manually, right?
yeah. I think the biggest first mind shift, which, again, I don't know what you see out there, but I don't even know if 50% of people have really, and I'm talking data professionals, like, but you got to remember, we have things have innovated so fast over the last 5 years or 6 years, where, well, you've been with Snowflake longer, but it's like like I said, like I'll introduce some clients who don't get it, and then there's some that are like super data mature, where I was doing, Kafka event streaming stuff back in 2018, 2019, but that was like less than
Oh
1%
yeah,
of
that was very
customers.
small, very
Yeah,
small.
and
Yeah.
it was some, it's like all the Netflix, all the really advanced people, like people that had data like that, they would get it.
Well,
But
and they had a business model that required them to learn how to do it in order to be successful, like Netflix in particular, streaming videos and all of the recommendations. It's like they had to be able to move at the speed of thought essentially, and so they
yeah,
had no choice. If they didn't innovate and get those concepts and get up to those ideas and get moving on it, they wouldn't have survived.
exactly. And it's also the same in the live event industry. They're trying, they
Yeah.
have the streams of data at these massive events, coming in nonstop. And it was just like, so you're right. Oh, part of it at the time stemmed from the companies who had to innovate, who had these data streams. And that's, there's such a variety pack. Like I would say probably not even 10% of companies still think that way, where they're on the concept of topics and ever changing data. And there's, there's a whole different way to think when you're there. And then you've got, let's just say that's one of the more advanced, or the AI ML on that side. You still got, who knows, 30-40% companies on daily batch
Still, yeah.
concepts, are a mixture. So you have this variety pack of people trying to understand. But I think the biggest thing to get closer to data ops and really understanding the value of DataOps.live is the data, not data as code, but that data actually changes and it needs to be versioned, where I still don't think a lot of people want to deal with that. And because that to me is where the data product finally becomes a true data product, right? It's where the data itself at some level is versioned and controlled,
Yeah.
right? Uh, and I just think that's a really, really hard shift for a lot of people, especially because a lot of them think with transactional data, right? Our streaming data, it's coming in at millisecond level. So that makes it sort of ridiculous to version that type of data. But at the same time, to do like repeatability, versioning, maintenance, you need some form of it. And I just think this is a hard shift for a lot of people to think this way.
Well, yeah, and I think that it goes back to again what our earlier discussion about feeding LLMs and machine learning models is when the data is changing that fast and coming potentially changing fast, and the character of the data may even be changing. That if you don't have that automated monitoring and testing in there at a data level, then you don't know that you're feeding bad data into these new systems that quickly. And the only way to do it is to automate it because there's not enough time.
Yeah,
There's not
there's
enough
no
lag
way,
time.
humans don't have enough
Yeah,
time to
when we were
do it.
doing batch, even if we're down to doing like micro batches, there was a little lag time there to test things before it got pushed into production. When we used to do weekly loads and daily loads and things like that. There was a little time to run some of these things, but now that you're talking about live streaming data, feeding live interactive systems, yeah, there's no time. That testing has to be part of the stream. So, quick shift topics as we're getting near the end here. Snowflake Summit's next week.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to at Summit next week?
Well, man, we've been at them since 2018. I think you remember that first one, or the one that I remember first for me is like it was way overcrowded. It was at I think it was San Fran hotel. And so we're
Yep.
back to San Fran. So excited about that. Honestly, I'm looking forward to spending time, with my bigger partners like DataOps.live, Coalesce. It's good to see both Coalesce and Sigma Computing just got funding, 50 million and 200 million. See them grow. I'm connected still, even after Bouchane and, a lot of the people that were my, champions. Kyle Rourke have left, probably like 450 Snowflake people. So look forward to seeing them. But, Snowflake Arctic, seeing innovations around that. A lot of stuff with what Jeff Holland's doing, AI, ML innovations, and the partners. And then for me personally, I'm really interested in concepts around automated data sets, things around like a whole nother level of automation that we're working on personally. So yeah, just excited all those different topics and what's the latest in streaming too with Snowflake. Uh, it's honestly become so big. It's like hard to like there's just so much to cover. You just got to try to do your best.
Yeah. No, it's a Snowflake Summit is following, I'll say, the path that Oracle Open World did a couple of decades ago, where it started out kind of small and then it got big, and then it's like, okay, now it's huge, and now we're taking over the Moscone Center in San
Yeah,
Francisco
yeah,
for the conference.
exactly.
It's like, yeah, I remember going to my first conference there. It was like 1995, I think it is. Yeah, we got so much going on. So yeah, so the data ops folks, they've got a booth booth 1322. And then on Wednesday, Guy Adams, the CTO and co-founder, and then Jeff, I think it's Jeff Holland, they're doing a talk. They're Wednesday at 11 a.m. Folks, you can just scan that QR code and it'll take you right to the link for that session. So if you're attending Snowflake Summit, you want to do that and make sure you don't miss that session on Wednesday at 11. Anything else coming up for you, Frank, other than Summit next week? Anything else on the horizon?
I think Summit's the big focus, and the work we're doing in Snowflake optimization with our tool, Snoptimizer. We're releasing a new version of that on the native app store or the marketplace. So yeah, I think those are the big things. And if you want, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, our independent Snowflake solutions community. Yeah, it's just excited to be at Summit next week.
Yeah, well, I'll look forward to seeing you there. We see
Awesome.
each
Thanks,
other
Kent.
in person. Yeah, so thanks for taking the time to be a guest today on our show, and great to see you. Great to chat with you about all these changes, and I'm sure we will chat more next week for sure. Thanks for everyone else for joining us today. This is actually a wrap for season 2 of the True Data Ops podcast. So stay tuned. Yeah. 2 down. That's right. So stay tuned over the summer as we start to announce the lineup for season 3. I'm sure it'll be awesome. And again, don't forget to drop by the DataOps.live booth if you're at Summit next week and connect with the team. I'll be wandering around for a day or so there, and Frank's going to be there. So a lot of Snowflake Data Superheroes. There's a Snowflake Data Superhero Lounge where you'll be able to connect with all these guys one way or another. And then, of course, as always, be sure to like the replays on today's show and forward it off to your friends. Tell your friends about the True Data Ops podcast. Send them to truedataops.org, where they can then get a link to all of the last, this season and last seasons, and they can catch up and hear all the great topics that we've had over the last 2 years. Subscribe so that when the announcements start coming out for season 3, you'll be sure to be on the first listeners to that. So until next time, everyone have an awesome summer, and everybody that's going to be at Summit next week, have a great time at Summit, and I'll see you on the other side. This is Kent Graziano, the Data Warrior, signing off for now.
Bye.